support the amendments standing in my right honourable friend's name and mine and others of my colleagues. Let me just start, Mr Deputy Speaker, by making it very clear, as my right honourable friend did, wherever he is, so well earlier on, which is that we have a problem here, and I'm surprised that the government doesn't really want to recognise that there is an issue here and is avoiding it. The umbrella companies and their unacceptable practices have now become very clear. Contractors being forced into schemes, being forced by recruitment agencies to use these umbrella companies, which they may not wish to do and may be concerned about. Some contractors being forced to use umbrella companies and opting out of the conduct of employment regulations is often mandatory, which removes the rights they had as agency workers, the kickbacks, the problems over holiday pay, the skimming of the assignment rate, and the mini umbrella companies. Some contractors sign up to use these specific companies, believing them to be compliant, but then discover they are employed by one with a different name, owned by a director, say, in the Philippines. And I think File on 4, my right honourable friend mentioned earlier on, has raised this particular issue. And the problem is that the worse the level of malpractice in this process, the greater the rewards and kickbacks for the agencies, reducing, of course, the revenue for the Treasury. And I have a huge amount of respect for my right honourable friend sitting on the Treasury bench at the moment and who will respond to all of this, and I'm sure he must, with his colleagues in the Treasury, be alert to this and understand this is a major problem. But I just can't quite understand why we're not using this finance bill to start putting some of this right. Yes, thank you for that.
For giving way, but hasn't this been a systemic problem with the Inland Revenue, that these schemes crop up? They have done for decades, and they take years to actually, and they're spreading like wildfire. They spread even faster now with social media. Used to be through the pubs and clubs, and therefore they need to, and ministers need to be on their back saying, why are you not dealing with these problems? There's a timing issue in this as well.
I agree with the right honourable gentleman, and the point that I'm trying to make tonight is, I think, a fairly gentle point to my right honourable friend and those others on the Treasury bench, which is this is something which we can rectify. We have the capacity to rectify it. If it goes much further, I think of the loan charge and the huge human problems that were caused by that, and the attempt by the Treasury then to use retrospective legislation to grab money back, and who got hammered in all this? Exactly. Not the organisations that were doing it, but the individuals that were led to believe they were in the right setup. And it's always going to be them that gets hammered. And I thought the purpose of government was to protect the vulnerable and deal with those who are abusing them. I give way to my friend.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. And it really is enormously frustrating for those of us who time and again have made representations to Treasury ministers on behalf of victims of the loan charge, only to be knocked back by ripostes relating to tax avoidance schemes. And now, when people who've suffered from the loan charge are urging colleagues on this side of the House, and no doubt on the other side as well, to take steps to ensure that people aren't trapped in these schemes in the future, the government don't want to give them that added layer of protection, so they seem to be wanting to hit them in both directions.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I won't risk repeating what he has said, but it is a reality that I was one of those that gave evidence to the review of the loan charge set up, because it was quite clear that it was causing huge problems for many decent people in my constituency, but I'm sure it was the same on all sides of the House. I don't for one moment pretend it was alone to some of us. So I recommend to my right honourable friend some of those amendments and the new clauses that we have been speaking about. I won't go through all of them, but I will want to make the point here, which is, number one, Amendment 33, which allows an umbrella not to be an intermediary and still operate, provides the following strict conditions were met. And my right honourable friend laid out those particular 5 conditions which are really critical, and I recommend those to him. I'm not going to repeat them because we'll just go on doing that all night. And Amendment 34, I just want to deal with this a little bit more detailed. The important thing about Amendment 34, I think, in reality, all inside IR35 workers could easily be paid via recruitment agency payroll. That is the key bit here. And umbrella companies are a benefit to recruiters, not to workers. As well as the original drafting of the off-payroll rules, an umbrella company could classify as a payment intermediary and so would have to be paid to the umbrella net of tax, reducing an incentive to exist. So the behavioural effect will mean agencies will put workers on payroll if they are not outside IR35. And the key thing is, would give a year for the sector to re-gear, provide their services agencies in a payroll payment bureau type manner, instead of for the government to take other decisive action, including banning certain practices and statutory regulation. Trying to be reasonable about this to the government, but I do think that this is really, really important. And I want to make the point, and I'm going to conclude really on this, which is, overall, if you look at the purpose of these amendments and new clauses in this area, I think they set out what the problem is. The people that will get hurt by all of this in the end, when the Treasury finally decides to do something about it, will be the people that were the victims of this, not those who set these schemes up. And I just want to say that there are 5 points here which I think are critical. The whole purpose is to stop overnight aggressive tax avoidance schemes induced and encouraged by some unscrupulous agencies, stop overnight the exploitation of contractors, forced into schemes which adopt malpractice to skim monies from contractors, stop overnight the kickbacks being used which encourage malpractice, and contain sunset clauses to ensure the sector has until 6th of April 2022 to prepare for the changes and make agencies and clients liable for any malpractice, thereby removing the incentive to encourage it. These are just very simple, basic points. We're not asking for a revolution. We're asking for sense. And I know exactly where this is going, because in 29 years I've seen this time and again. Don't move now, later on blame somebody else, and back comes the Treasury to say we'll now get that money back. And I think the loan charge, and I come back to this finding conclusion, is the biggest example of where, when this goes wrong, it is those that have suffered that end up paying the penalty, not those who have skimmed off the top and are now living somewhere outside of the reach of Her Majesty's Treasury. I simply say to my right honourable friend, in due deference, please, please give the consideration to this, at least have a proper review so that we may engage this in due course and settle it.
Mike Hillier.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise, first of all, as far I should draw my attention, the members' attention to my entry in the Register of